Welcome to the Unstoppable Recording Machine Podcast, brought to you by Focusrite, supplying hardware and software products used by professional and amateur musicians, which enables the high-quality production of music. Focusrite, sound is everything. And now your hosts, Joey Sturgis, Joe Lenasek, and EYAL Levy.
Hey everybody, you are listening to the Unstoppable Recording Machine Podcast, and I am your beloved, or maybe even hated host,
it's
Mr.
beloved.
Joel. Beloved. I don't know about that. Mr. Joel Wanasek, and with me is the unstoppable, well-groomed, and with the sexiest beard alive, EYAL Levy.
That's me.
That was a pretty decent intro, wasn't it?
Yeah, I am well-groomed. For a bear.
For a bear.
Yeah.
Well, with us today, we have a very special guest. We're going to talk about a pretty cool topic here that we've never covered. We're going to talk about licensing music and songs, and we have an expert in this who is my neighbor and the guy that I rent from and have known for many years, and that is Mr. Eric Labrosse. Eric, what's up, man?
How's it going, dudes?
We are doing good. So I guess I'll talk a little bit about Eric and give him an intro, but basically Eric records a lot of local and regional bands, and he makes a fantastic living doing it, but he also licenses all of their music, and he's gotten his band's placements on all sorts of national TV, wrestling, Sports Center, etc. And he's made a killing doing it and put a ton of money into his band's pockets doing it. So it's really opened up a lot of stuff. He's a multi-talented entrepreneur. He just bought a brand new building here, which my office resides in, and I'm renting from him. And it's really, really awesome. So Eric, how on earth did you start and make the transition from recording local bands and taking their music and get into the whole licensing thing?
Sure. Back in about 2000, I think it was about 2008, I started recording bands out of my mom and dad's basement, and my main focus starting to record bands was getting local musicians a good quality recording for cheap. And I know what it's like to go into a studio and be pressured for time and get charged per hour, and everybody's stressed out, and you'd end up spending an arm and a leg and getting a fraction of the results you expected, and it's very painful. And I wanted to help bands be more comfortable and afford to record good quality music. So I started recording bands in 2008. Fast forward to 2012, where the licensing started. I also play in my own rock band called The Heroes Lie, and we had an opportunity that was presented to us through a third-party company to license our music through a catalog service. And there was an audition process. We submitted for the audition process. We really didn't think much of it. I've tried licensing our music prior to that with a few different companies and had very little success. So we're like, let's give this a try. It's an exclusive agreement. Maybe that'll be the difference between not landing much to landing some more stuff. So a year went by, didn't really see much, $20 here, $30 there. And then another year went by, so it was almost 2 years. And the next thing you know, we landed a theme song for a wrestler on WWE. The wrestler's name was Mason Ryan. He had a pretty short-lived career in WWE, but it was still pretty cool to see your song that you made as an entrance theme to a WWE wrestler, especially growing up watching WWE as a kid and all that. And simultaneously with that, we ended up landing the song in ESPN Sports Center, and it was the one song that just kept hitting over and over and over. And, roughly about $10,000, $20,000 later, here we are talking about licensing music. I took the opportunity that my band got with licensing songs through the catalog licensing service, which is one of many ways to license music, and I said, well, why couldn't I apply this to all the bands that I work with and all the local musicians and make them some money and then take a cut and make something for myself as well? And the next thing you know, I got 600-700 songs in the catalog. And since 2013, my bands have made, this is their profit and sync fees, $120,625.14 since 2013. in sync fees for song licensing.
That's incredible.
Nice.
I mean, even my sign bands, some of them, I mean, whatever that cut aggregates down to in terms of per band, even some of my sign bands aren't making any money, if that makes sense. So,
yeah.
You know, thinking about that from a local band, I mean, I know a lot of your bands, Eric, just from hanging out and walking past the dudes smoking out and BSing with those guys, that some of those guys are literally paying for all of their studio time and all their records they make with you just off the licensing money that they're making, plus putting a bunch into their pockets, which is a pretty sweet deal.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the coolest things to see is bands that come in here. They don't have to worry about paying for recording because the licensing pays for it. I just had a band in yesterday that they make enough money where their last 2 records are paid for, and now their next record's going to be paid for too because they do well with licensing.
Let me just say, that's unheard of for local bands. I mean, let's take a moment to acknowledge that local bands are lucky to make $50 if
Absolutely.
they're at a show. If they're not a cover band, they're lucky to make $50. And so to be able to put that kind of money into local bands' pocket is huge. That's
Absolutely.
It's really unheard of.
And funny enough, I had a song placement with WWE with Paul Heyman. He's a famous manager with Brock Lesnar. And one thing that he quoted is every industry must constantly reinvent themselves. And I think the job of a recording studio back from 10, 20 years ago has completely changed to what it is today. And I think you guys would probably agree with that. You know, times have changed.
Oh, absolutely.
And you have to adapt to that. You have to find a way to continue to make a living with the way things are right now at the age of technology with all that going on. And I just grabbed it by the freaking horns and ran with it.
Now, one thing that's really interesting, and I'll tell some backstory here. So Eric and I, we came up around the same time in our, we'll call it the regional scene here in like Milwaukee, southeastern Wisconsin, at the same time, and we are geographically maybe a 15-minute drive from each other as we were starting our businesses. So we both existed in the exact same market alongside each other, and we both thrived and made great livings recording local bands for many, many, many years. Something that I think Eric and I both did right, as opposed to some of the other studios in town that may have not made it while, you know, we were thriving and growing our businesses, was that we both kind of specialized in different things. So my specialty was really like mixing and mastering and breaking bands and creating brands. So basically taking a local band and teaching them how to get signed, or, you know, like getting a really awesome high level radio mix or something like that, where Eric really sat down and he focused on songwriting and getting bands placements and teaching bands how to write songs that were going to be appealing. So, you know, something like the WWE would pick up their song. And it's really been interesting because as our careers have grown and we've both become very, very successful at what we do, I remember when we started off as like local studios, essentially kind of like in competition with each other, but we both managed to thrive and we're both still here and, you know, doing better than ever at the same time in the same market with working with bands essentially in the same kind of style and sound.
Yeah, I think, you know, back in those days, Joel, you focused more on some of the heavier stuff and I focused more on kind of the rock stuff, but you still had your radio rock bands and that, you know, you worked with in that. And
oh yeah, absolutely.
That kind of, in a sense, that helped us both do well because we had different sides of the spectrum that we sat on within the same genre. So
yeah, absolutely. So that just goes to show you, you know, some people ask me for advice in terms of their career, a lot of subscribers here at URM, and they're like, okay, I live in this city, but there's like X, Y, and Z guy that are pretty good. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, well, you know, when I was coming up, there was a lot of guys who were good, but we all managed to find our niche and we need to specialize and focus on what can I do that no one else can do. And, you know, what Eric and I originally have done here with our careers, I think is a fantastic example of how to do that and just find something that, you know, no one else in your market does. For me, it was no one knew how to mix heavy music correctly. For Eric, it was no one knew how to get songs placed and to write songs that were going to be placeable on, you know, mainstream television.
So, speaking of song placements, how does, let's just say I'm in a band, right? And I'm not recording with you, Eric, because I live in Maine. My band lives in Maine and we don't have any contacts in the music industry, but we're listening to this podcast and now we're inspired. We want to get our really rad songs onto SportsCenter.
yeah,
Well, what's step one?
Call Eric? No, kidding.
you could go that route and call me because since I started licensing music, I've built up a reputation of sorts. And
okay, well, we'll put your contact info in the show notes.
Sure. And then the second thing you want to do is research song licensing companies. And there's 3 ways you can essentially license music. There is, you know, you can call WWE and say, hey, you want to use my song, and go that route. Usually that doesn't work out so hot. And
just call them up and talk to the secretary and be like, hey, I got a song.
Yeah, hey, I got this really cool song, dude. I really think you guys would like it. Huh? And but the better way to go is through a company that licenses music, because they can pre-screen it. They can, they have the contact established already, and you can have a music license. The second way to license music is through a licensing service that does, shopping individual songs or bands, or has.
What are some examples of those?
Well, one of them used to be music dealers. They went under, and now they're back up and running because I think someone bought them out. They're a non-exclusive with an exclusive option to license music, and they don't. I guess they kind of have built a catalog now through the years, so I can't even say that. But getting in touch with a music supervisor is essentially what I'm trying to get at here. Music supervisor will sit there and monitor all the music for a show or multiple shows. If you can get in touch with one of those people, I used to know a couple of guys like that back. Go Big Entertainment in LA was one of them, and I'd throw music at them, and nothing landed. That was one of the companies that didn't quite work out for me, but they've landed plenty of music for other bands. And for us, it was just a stylistic thing. Stylistically, our band wasn't really fitting. And so music supervisors is a good way to get songs placed, because they have the connections and it's their job to place that music into programs. The second way you can go is through a secondary licensing company. There's, Killer Tracks, I believe. There's CD Baby.
Doesn't like Taxi do some stuff like that, or is they more of a shopping service? I forgot.
Taxi does have, song licensing as an option with theirs, I believe. And it's like, hey, we're looking for a song for this. Another company is Broadjam. They have things like that too, where you can,
Ooh, I'm giving a seminar for them today at 3:00.
Yes. And so, they have opportunities they present. They say, hey, we have a client who's looking for a song. You want to submit? We'll pre-screen it. We'll narrow it down to 5, send them in, and hopefully you land it and you make a bunch of money. So that's the second way to license music is going through a company like that or a music supervisor like that to get into there. It's easier said than done sometimes. You have to have a lot of patience and be able to take a lot of rejection, because there's thousands of songs that are submitted sometimes. The third way that I used is catalog licensing. You throw your song on a catalog and you just wait for someone to pick it. And we picked a very well-known, successful catalog service called APM Music out of Los Angeles. And they have music everywhere, like literally everywhere they have music. And they have a giant catalog of over 700,000 songs that clients can subscribe to, kind of like they do with the podcast stuff and the URM and that. You subscribe, and then you could take your giant fee of whatever dollars you pay a year. You pick number of songs out of the catalog, and you get paid accordingly based off of what the client pays and how many songs they use. And I won't speak too much further past that, because I don't work for APM, and I'm not sure the details of their business, nor do I think that they would disclose things like that. But that's the general idea behind it. So we submitted the songs into a catalog. They listen to it. They pre-screen it. They organize it. They say it's a uplifting rock song that has euphoric this, and here's the lyrics, here's the key signature, here's the tempo, here's the instrumental, here's the clean version, here's the acoustic version, whatever you want. And then clients...
Medium Funk 114.
Exactly. Medium Funk 114. So they go in, and clients can search by any parameters they want to find whatever song they want. They want a hard rock song that says the word go in it. They could find that in a matter of seconds. And APM Music's the catalog service that I've used for my bands to get those placements. And one of the big things with catalog licensing with APM Music is the music is all pre-cleared, ready to go. There's no additional paperwork. There's no additional nothing. They can just pick the song, have the subscription, and go. So, bands that I work with generally aren't already in a multiple amount of contracts with managers, labels, and things like that. And that's actually really good for song licensing. So if you're a band or a musician listening to this, and you're saying, hey, I got some good music and I don't have any, label contracts, contracts with people outside of your band, that's actually really good for licensing, because you're clear to license it and start making money.
Do performing rights organizations come into play at all, like BMI or ASCAP?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we should talk about how this works financially, because I feel like a lot of people don't understand how. So your song is played on TV. How do you get paid? How do you break it down? So let's go through that whole thing.
Sure. Well, first, a client, let's say WWE, they want to use a song for something. They'll pay an upfront fee to use that song. And in my case with APM Music, they'll pay a fee to pull it out of the catalog. And that fee is based upon what they have for a budget, how many songs they use for their subscription, and how much they pay for their subscription.
$200 million, dude.
Yeah. So So WWE says, hey, we'll pay $200 million for this song. That's called the sync fee. Now, everybody gets their cut of the sync fee. The licensing service gets a cut of their sync fee. A guy like me gets a cut of the sync fee. And obviously the band gets a cut of the sync fee. When I first talked about that number in sync fees that I've made my bands, that's their profit share. That's money in their pockets, the $120,000. So APM's made quite a bit there. And, I've made some money there too. But, for any band pocketing, or my band's pocketing that kind of money, that's good stuff. And so you get paid the sync fee up front. Now, WWE puts the song with the video. They sync it to the video. That's why it's called a sync fee. And then they put it on the air on USA Network for Monday Night Raw, for example. Well, now USA Network has to pay royalties to the song owners. BMI, ASCAP, and CSAC are performance rights organizations that collect those royalties on behalf of the artist and pay them accordingly quarterly. And what you get paid in royalties depends on the length of the song, whether it has vocals or not, and how many people are watching it. I mean, if you have a song that's background music and there's 10,000 viewers, it'll pay crap. If you have a song with vocals that's in front of 4 million people, that's a theme song for a wrestler, which is actually you get a little special bonus there when it's like an entrance theme because it's highlighting and it's used to help brand a wrestler and stuff. And then you're seeing a little bit more money than that. I mean, to give an idea, we had a wrestler theme song with the Heroes Lie, my band, and they used the song twice on Monday Night Raw and twice on SmackDown. We saw roughly $1,200 to $1,500 in back-end royalties from BMI.
And that's on top of the sync fees.
That's on top of the sync fees, which was an additional $1,000 or so. And then the next thing you know, you sell $2,000 in records, and then you sell another $2,000 in records because you have your music exposed, and it just snowballs from there.
So how does the PROs work? Let's break that down because, there's CSAC, BMI, and ASCAP, and somebody might not be familiar. So I'm a neophyte licensing person. I want to sign up. I don't know who to go with, BMI or ASCAP or CSAC. What's the difference? How does it work? Does it cost any money, etc.?
Sure. They all essentially do the same thing. BMI, if you want to register as a writer, it's free at BMI.com. That's the simple, easy way to go, and that's normally what I recommend to my bands because nobody likes forking out money up front. As far as the individual differences, you kind of got to do your research on it, and there's some that a certain genre might work better for another genre. Like singer-songwriters, sometimes they tend to stick with ASCAP because of XYZ. With BMI, it's free and easy. You go to BMI.com, you register as a writer, you're done. With ASCAP, I believe it's a $35 fee for a writer. It's also a $35 fee as a publisher. And the fees may have changed since 2 years ago or 3 years ago when I last looked that up. But so with ASCAP, it's $35 to register as a writer and $35 to register as a publisher. With BMI, it's free to register as a writer, but the fee to register as a publisher is much higher. It's like $150. So there's some pros and cons there. So I wish I could give you guys a little bit more detail on that, but that's something that viewers would have to kind of look into. But the path of least resistance if you're registering as a writer is just go to BMI.com and do it for free.
Who counts as a publisher in these situations? Like in the WWE situation?
Sure.
Who counts as the publisher?
Who would collect the publishing share of the royalties is what you're asking.
Yes.
Okay. When the song gets placed in, let's say a song makes $100 in back-end royalties. $50 of that goes towards the publishing share and $50 of that goes towards the ownership. Which, if you are the only person that owned the song, you'd get $50. If there's 5 people and you split it evenly, you'd get $10. The publishing share then gets divvied up. The licensing company takes a percentage of that publishing share, and then they pay out the remaining percentage to the artist. And that's how that works in that situation, and they have their own publishing setup to collect that. And with the agreement that you have, they are allowed to collect it. Now, if you had a song on the radio and it made $1,000 in royalties, you would want to have your own publishing setup so you can collect the publishing share of those royalties. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, let me just tell people that this is another, like Eric said earlier, it's to your advantage to actually not be on a record label in these situations, because when you get signed, you oftentimes also get signed for publishing.
Yep.
And whether or not you get signed to the label's publishing company or a different publishing company, you're 9 out of 10 times will end up in a publishing contract once you're on a label. But if you're not on a label, you can be your own publisher and then collect on both sides, both as the artist and the publisher.
Sure. I actually just had a band that went through that, and they didn't license with me yet, but they signed an agreement with management, and the management asked for the right to license their song, and they wanted a share of publishing in that. And I says, well, if you're going to give away the rights to license your music, you better make sure that they can do it and do it damn well, because I know I do. And, so.
Did that happen with one of my bands that I licensed through you?
Yeah, and that's an interesting story without naming the name of the band. I licensed a band of Joel's. They did very well. They continue to do well. By well, I mean, as long as we don't name the name of the band, I'll throw out the numbers roughly. But they were making at least $1,000 a quarter in sync, for their band. So, roughly call it $4,000 a year in sync fees plus back end royalties. And that was just when they were getting started. And then they signed an agreement that said I can't license their stuff anymore, and my agreement with them expired. So they chose to, remove their songs from licensing. Well, their contract with XYZ, managed label, whatever, didn't quite work out. And, now they're out in money. They don't have their music licensed. And I actually recently spoke to them about re-upping, and they were pretty open to that option. So
yeah, they've been placing like crazy. I mean, I'm still getting my BMI statements, and I still see them generating placements. So there you go.
Yeah, I just got to get them on the phone.
Yeah, I think the
bands are so stupid sometimes.
Yeah, well, when you're under the veil of guise of big time management, you know how influential those people can be, because the band is young, they don't know any better, they're taking whatever first opportunity they can get. They can't go shop because no one will take a risk on them. So basically, it's whatever they want them to do. They'll run around like dogs doing it.
Yeah, bands and labels and managers, they're like when you meet that hot girl that's fucking crazy as hell. You sit there and you're like, oh, wow, that is so cool. That is so awesome. They can do this. They can do this. And then you find out it's not everything you thought it was, and then everything falls apart. And you're like, well, fuck. Not all the time, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. There's so many contracts that I've had Joel look at a couple contracts before. He's like, oh, there's no way in heck I'd sign. I was like, there's no way in heck I'd sign. He goes, yeah, but there's 1,000 bands out there that would. And it's just like, that is so true. So true.
Yeah, that's... I'll just say this. If a manager comes to you and you're in a band, I know this is kind of off topic, but this is something I get asked a lot, so I'm going to go on a little rant about it. If a manager comes to you and says, sign this contract, I'll get you signed, blah, 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 and it requires you to pay them a monthly fee, 9 out of 10 times it's absolute horseshit. A real manager comes in, believes in the band, and works on back end because, they're not just trying to pay their electric bill by scamming a bunch of local bands. They're finding real talent that has value that's going to provide a return for them.
Absolutely.
So I just make that distinction. I've never seen, like in all my management contracts that I've ever done with pretty much any manager I've ever worked with, or any agent, every single one was done on a handshake or an email. It wasn't like we sat down and had a 40-page agreement. It was literally just like, you want to do this? Yes. Okay, let's be men about it and go make some money together.
Yeah. And if your contract that you're reading and ready to sign has spelling errors in the first sentence, just think twice.
Yeah. Oh God, EYAL. Eric came across the hall the other day, and one of his bands got an offer from a smaller label that had signed one of my bands, and I'm not going to say the name of the label. It's a very, very small label. We'll classify them as a wannabe label. And he's like, dude, what do you know about this label? And he showed me the contract, and every sentence, grammar, spelling errors, and I'm like, yeah, that about sums up how good of a label they are. I mean, they don't have any money, so they can't do anything for the band anyways. So you might as well just be independent, because you'll do better and you'll not have to give up 85% of all your money.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, just be smart if you're in a band. I guess that's all we're saying. Those are some serious red flags. I mean, I've worked with some really serious managers that manage some absolutely massive bands. And again, we've done handshake deals, and it's not uncommon. So just be aware of that when some guy who's like a small manager comes and tries to sign your band and he wants a substantial amount of money up front. He's just paying his electric, and he probably isn't going to do shit for you, and he's probably just snaking you. So just be aware that stuff happens, but I feel like there's less of those people than there were like 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah, they still exist though. Oh yeah, they still exist.
They get called out though. That's the thing. So do you think that for someone who wants to just write for a living that this is a viable option if they're smart about it, and assuming they're pretty good?
Absolutely.
Okay, so what do you think that some of the bands that are doing really well through this, what kind of figures do they pull?
Here, I could run you through some numbers here.
We gonna sing?
In Sync, without naming the name of the bands, because I want to
Yeah, no names.
check their. I want everybody hitting them up for charity money now. You know.
And these are bands that are like bands that record records with you, and then you do your thing and you get the songs synced. But these are not bands that are trying to write songs for a living, right?
Well, it's funny you bring that up, because one of my top bands started out as a band. Then they all grew up, went to college, got good jobs, and now they're out of college doing their good jobs, and they still record songs because they're making money. They don't play shows anymore. There's barely a presence of their band at all. They have like 200 likes on Facebook. They don't care. They're making, in the last 3 years, they've made like 25 grand in Sync. So it's like, why not? So, but that's one of the top bands that I have, has made about 25 grand in Sync, and they'll see up to $1,000 per quarter in back end royalties, but they've seen as low as $150 individually in a quarter as well from BMI ASCAP. So it all depends on how much music is used in that. But some of the top bands here I'm looking at, you got 25,000, you got 15,000. This is all cumulative. I don't even think I updated with the last quarter too, so it might be slightly higher than that. 19,000, 8,000, cumulative in the last 3 years, 8,000, 13. So there's a few top bands, and then once you get above $3,000 and you get the ball rolling, you really don't have to worry about paying for records, because you're probably going to make that yearly.
So for a band who just on the level of covering band expenses, you can totally afford your band and even pay for a van and good gear and good records through stuff like this. And if you're a songwriter and you really just want to write for a living, and if you really write a song a day kind of thing, after a few years you could probably be making a pretty decent amount of money in your own pocket.
Yes, you could. Absolutely. That's a very good possibility if you play your cards right and you have good quality music. That's another thing too I really haven't brought up, is these songs that we license, they're all professionally done by me for the most part. I do have a secondary publishing that does songs outside of the studio, but I'm super picky with that. And I've had bands say, hey, I don't work with you. I really don't have an interest in working with you, but can you license my music? And I'll listen to it in the first 10 seconds. His vocals are pitchy. I'm just like, hell no.
Yeah, so that's a good point, Eric. Let's talk about what makes a song licensable, what makes a song, marketable, what kind of lyrics, vocals, song structure, stuff like that. Because I feel like that's equally as important as knowing the nuts and bolts.
The first thing that's most important is that you have a professional quality product. On a scale of 1 to 10, let's call 6 being professional, 6 and above, and then it's just a matter of taste or opinion, or, I have my style of mix, you have your style of mix, or whatever like that. It has to be at a professional standard. So you need to find a way to at least get your mixes to that standard. That's the most important thing, because that's the ground. That's the groundwork for it all. And just because you think you might have something that's professionally done or sounds pretty good doesn't necessarily mean that it is. And I found that out a lot of times with bands that try to do things themselves. And it's just like, okay, maybe this is good, but your vocals are pitchy, or your lyrics are kind of funky the way you say this or that, and
your song is 8 minutes long.
So you need to have a professional quality product. It's recommended you work with a professional to get that quality product, because I'm gonna pull the drywall story. You know where I'm going with this, Joel, right?
Yes, do the drywall story.
All right. So I'm building the new building. I got the drywall going up. Me and my buddy were hanging drywall. In about a week, we got the first layer of Joel's room done and his ISO booth. And then I'm like, man, I'm really strapped for money or whatever. So I had a couple of guys come in and say, wait, we'll help you out financially. We'll hire a drywall crew. The guys came in for $2,000, did the entire building in 2 days. And working with a professional in the recording world is the same concept. They're going to do a way better job, way faster, and you're going to get a quality product. So when you're licensing your music, you got to start with a quality product. It's best you work with a professional person that does that. I mean, you might be a really good guitar player, but you might not hear music like a producer does as a big picture thing. You know, when I've seen Joel work with drummers, and I work in a similar way where, you know, you take apart fills or drum beats, or you switch this or you do that, and then you add the bass, and then you switch this, do that, and it's having a second ear on that is just, it's worth it. And, you know, being a professional too. So definitely have a professional quality product is the first step to licensing your music. The second step you probably want to... now, with me, I do a lot of sports licensing and stuff. Lyrically, well, let's start music. Musically, high-energy stuff does really well. And unique stuff. You know, like that riff. You know what I mean? Like riffs that's catchy and that's, you know, that's heavy, that's cool, and it's smooth. You know, just having something, you know, real solid and, you know, real catchy, upbeat stuff to... If it's high energy, it's going to come across high energy with the video that they put it with, so they're going to pick it, you know? Or if it's really sad, you got to make it super sad. You have to really get those the emotions to translate. You know, that's a lot of recordings kind of lack that energy or that, you know, that passion behind it, or it gets lost sometimes. And, you know, keeping that is very important. And so yeah, musically, you know, real emotional stuff, real high energy stuff. It's got to be. Take what the song is and amp it up a little bit to make it a little bit more towards what the goal is for it. And that's what's going to end up licensing well.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but is it not necessarily about the full song when it comes to this kind of stuff? Is it more about having like an awesome 45 seconds, like an awesome riff into a chorus or something? Or is it about the full song?
It depends.
Yeah, absolutely. It depends.
Depends on the target, I would say. I mean, I've had a ton of success licensing myself, not only through Eric, but I linked up with a sports rock, like, exclusive company, and me and my singer at the time, we were in the top 5 writers and placers there. Like, we were placing songs every other week, and we landed a ton of stuff, and sometimes they would just grab like a 15-second bit and loop a riff, or sometimes they would use a whole song. Like, for example, we did the Atlanta Falcons theme and Seven Dust played it, and you know, they used the whole song for that, and they would intro all the bands, or not the bands, sorry, the players. What am I thinking, the bands? But you know what I mean. I don't know if they still do it anymore or whatever, but that just gives you an example. So it depends on the situation. If it's a jingle for a commercial, for example, we've had Chris Cernella on this podcast, and you know, Chris wrote like a Nutella jingle, and he did a whole commercial, and you know, so he's had like little parts and little jingles as well as fully produced songs that have multiple elements and, you know, very long productions in terms of broadcast. So it just depends on what you're writing for.
Yeah.
Okay, I see. That makes perfect sense.
You know, if you want to be just a writer for jingles and commercials and stuff, you need to find the right licensing company, the right music supervisor that deals with that kind of stuff, and then you write for it. You write for, and even in radio rock and all that stuff like that, you write for your audience, and that's just how it goes. And with me, you know, full songs, and then they pick and choose what they want. The client will cut it up however the heck they want it to be cut. So, I mean, when ESPN used one of my songs, they took half of the verse and popped it into the chorus. They switched the second verse lyric, like the first half of it with the first half of the first verse, or something weird. And I was just kind of like, wow, they really chopped that up like the way they wanted it to be. So they can do anything with it. And they have, you know, options for, you know, just the vocal track, an instrumental version, the regular version, whatever they need to use for something like that. So,
all right, well, that makes perfect sense. So I guess it's out of your hands at that point. Okay, so step 1 is you get a professional as possible product. Step 2 is you write music that is syncable, whatever that means. Yeah, high energy, and depending
high
on
emotion,
and right for your target. If you want to write a tampon commercial, you better know how to play acoustic guitar. And,
dude, I got that tampon riff though. It's so good.
So, all right. So what's step 3?
Well, lyrically, and here's the thing. lyrically, some of the best titles. Well, let's do this. Step 3 is the title of the song. Make it stick out. One of the first song that my band licensed that did well, it was called Here and Now or Never. It was a unique twist on, it was a play on words, here and now or never. We just put it all together. And when someone sees that in a catalog, they're like, I'm going to try this out. Boom, play. Some of the other songs that do well with licensing, Madness, Never Give In.
I licensed one that...
Shoot for the Stars. Shoot for the Stars. For sports and for all that, it does really well. And they could, if the energy in the song is a good quality and they like it for what they need, then the title can kind of draw them in, as well as the lyrics.
That's so hilarious to me, Eric, that we've both independently licensed a song called Never Give In.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Never Give In was one of the songs from that top band that's made about $25,000. So they did well. They knew what they were doing, So
what about actual lyrical content? And of course, the title of the song, having a good title or a slogan. And let's talk about, we did a podcast with our good buddy Kane Churko, and he was talking about like getting that slogan that you'd want to put on a t-shirt, or something that people are going to want to chant. I call it the bar test, where you're at the bar and you're totally lit and wasted and like you can't remember anything, but you can sing that payoff and you've just heard the song for the first time, the click, click, boom, or whatever the hell, what I mean? Like you have that tagline. So what about like the rest of the lyrics for the song? Like what kind of direction do you usually give the singers and the lyricists in the band in terms of like, this is going to make this song more marketable? Like for example, are you allowed to cuss? Are you not allowed to cuss?
I'll give you an example of something like that comes in. I'm going to use a song that my band had as an example and how I applied this to all the bands that I work with after that. And like, I love using my band as a learning experience for other people's shit, because then we don't have to worry about us losing out on something. We could test run it or whatever. Like the licensing, it was a test run to see how it went. If we got screwed or didn't make any money, I wouldn't have done it for the rest of my bands, But there was a song I had written, and I was pissed off at this guy, and I had this riff going, and ironically, it was written on the can, so the working title was Shit Riff. And yeah, and it turned into a song called and then the original lyric was, I'm not a fighter, but you might change my mind, like I wanted to beat this guy up or something. I'm like, dude, nobody wants to walk into the freaking arena and say I'm not a fighter. They want to put their fist in the air and say I am a fighter. So we changed the lyric. And that's a good example of what I tell my bands to do when something like that comes in. You should always find a way to multiply your audience with your lyrics. And that goes for anything, not just licensing, but it especially does well with licensing. If you got this song about, being a badass and all this stuff cool, and then you say, oh yeah, that girl broke my heart. It's like, no, just let's get rid of that and just keep going with being a badass, Like,
no way, bro. That's my lyric. You can't change it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that happens too. That that happens, but that's when you tell them to suck it up and pull their tampon out, and you go from there, right?
So I'm always interested because we're pretty ruthless with our clients, but I mean in a positive way. How do you usually deal with like a band walks into your studio and you're like, dude, this is a great song. This is going to make money. We're going to license the shit out of this. And the guys in the band are like, dude, I don't know, man. Music first, bro. That's not the artistic integrity of my song. Blah, blah. How do you deal with those guys?
Well, here's what I do. I tell them a story about how that happened once and what happened. There's a band that came in. They were all sorts of like in their own bubble. They wanted it this way. And I said, listen, man, you got these weird freaking 4 chords going on in this chorus. You need to just make that a simple 4-chord progression. Sing that line over it. It was a great line and everything's cool. No, man, that's too 8th grade. And I'm like, dude, you need to listen to what the fuck I'm saying to you right now. Here's why. I know what I'm doing. I do this for a living. And they fought me tooth and nail until they actually kept it their way. And you know what happened? Their band went nowhere. Their songs weren't approved for licensing. And it just was downhill from there because they didn't know how to freaking listen.
Imagine that.
Yeah, imagine that. And then I tell bands that story, and I'm just like, listen, you got to trust me. I know what I'm doing. I've been doing this for a while. And 9 out of 10 bands that work with me, they come in with an open mind. And there's still always that one band that doesn't want something changed for a certain reason. So then I try to just bend them a little bit. We'll come to a middle ground on something. So, but that's how things work with me. But I think bands respect me enough now that there's very few that will sit there and argue something like that. And
Yeah, it takes time to build credibility.
I hate it when I have to spell it out for a band. I'm like, here's why you need to change this, because you got a half step difference between these two notes, between your lead and your rhythm track, and it sounds like complete crap. My ear catches that, but yours doesn't. They're like, well, I think it sounds fine. I was like, that's because you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. You know?
Hey, next time you need an enforcer and you have a split decision, you call me. I'll come walk across the hall and I'll be like, you see this fucking application for Pizza Shuttle? That's your future. And I'll shut the fuck up and start listening.
Yeah, and then I gotta sit there and spell it out on the guitar. Here's this chord here. Here's this here. Here's the two notes that are hitting at the same time. I'm gonna highlight them for you right now. How does this sound? Womp. And then boom, they're like, oh. It's like, yeah.
Womp, the sound of half steps.
So, but
Well, at the same time, that'll be the band that walks in and has a huge ego and wants to be like, oh yeah, man, we're going to be huge. We're going to succeed, blah, blah, blah. But they don't want to do anything that actually makes them successful. You know, they're going to be super opinionated, but they're not going to do any work and they're not going to listen to anybody because they know better. And where do they end up several years down the road?
Nowhere.
Working at Pizza Shuttle, serving me pizza. I won't eat pizza from there because it will ruin my career. But I'm just using that metaphorically.
Yeah. So to recap with the steps of the licensing, the first one that we had was you got to have a professional product. You got to have that. Number two is you got to have high energy music. If it's a super emotional song, push it to make it even more emotional than it is. You know, make someone cry when they listen to the damn thing so you could land your tampon placement, you know? And then the third thing, you got to have the lyrics match up the title. The title of that song does make a difference, you know? So I think that if you're looking through a catalog and a good title catches someone's ears, they're going to listen to the lyrics. Make sure those lyrics add up. Make sure you find a way to multiply your audience, revise your lyrics, do what you can. If you can, try to find the most unique way to say something general. That's how I like to go about it, like for sports stuff, you know what I mean? Don't say, I'm in the boxing ring and stuff like that. Be like, I'm ready to fight, you know? Then that goes, you just multiplied your audience times however many sports out there by changing one lyric, you know? So there's that. The last step in licensing is just find someone that knows what they're doing to license your music for you. You got to get someone that, just like you have a professional product you need to put out there, you got to have someone that's a professional in the licensing field to do it too. You got to be a team. You got to be a team with someone to get things done. And do your research when you're looking for a company. Like if someone approaches you or you approach someone and you're ready to make an agreement with someone, make sure they got their ducks in a row and they got some ground to stand on. There's so many companies that say, yeah, I want to license your music. It's okay. What have you placed? You know, what's the agreement? And then what are people making? I mean, you could ask a band that they've licensed, hey, how much did you guys get for this placement? And, you know, so what if you ask them? I mean, whatever. They might tell you, they might not. But if they do tell you, you can at least get a gauge for what's going on. So yeah, that's my steps for licensing your music as an independent artist. The less contracts you're involved with, the better. If you're an independent artist, you sign one to license your music, you're probably going to do well if you got some good tunes.
And what are some things to avoid when looking into this?
Just like bullshit managers and labels, upfront fees I'm not a fan of. If it's a small fee, don't worry too much about it.
What's a small fee?
Like, let's say you got to pay $5 to submit for an opportunity for something and you really think you got a good song for the opportunity that they're asking for. Sometimes companies charge a small fee to filter 2,000 songs down to 100. You know, that's all that fee is in a lot of instances is a filter.
Get serious money, right?
Correct. Are you serious about submitting your song for this? And then they can use that as a filter. But if you got a company that says, hey, like I would never do this for any of my bands, whether I work with them or not. I would never say you got to pay $500 up front or $1,000 up front. Stay away from all that bullshit. There are companies that try to pull that on you, and it's bullshit. Just like the managers and labels that try to do that stuff, you should always take a cut on the back end for the work that you do. So avoid that.
I'll sign your band, but you give us $5,000.
Yeah. Also make sure you read the contracts thoroughly because you might be signing into a 5-year deal and not even know it. And then when the label approaches you, then when your big opportunity comes that you actually do want and it looks like a good deal and they say we need to license your songs in order to work with you, make sure you're able to do that. A lot of my bands that I work with sign a 1-year agreement that's auto-renewable quarterly. So essentially they're locked in for a year. And after that, they could pretty much pull out whenever they want. So but a lot of them don't because they make money.
Well, Eric, that was awesome. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wealth of information doing this again.
It's very informative.
Honored to be here. Honored to be here.
Congratulations on all the success you've had doing this, and it's really, really cool. So I feel like, you know, for the ambitious people out there that run studios that want to pursue something like this, you know, it's totally doable. You just got to put the work in like anything else.
Yep.
Quit being a bastard.
Don't be a bastard.
Here and now or never.
Exactly.
There you go.
The Unstoppable Recording Machine Podcast is brought to you by Focusrite, supplying hardware and software products used by professional and amateur musicians, which enables the high-quality production of music. Focusrite, sound is everything. Visit Focusrite.com for more information. To ask us questions, make suggestions, and interact, visit urm.academy/podcast and subscribe today.